Since I started making videos more regularly on YouTube, I've been dedicating my channel to sharing my own thoughts in an attempt to break through certain trends of toxicity and spite that have been flourishing over the internet. And truth be told, as much as I feel compelled to do it whenever I hear something that frustrates me and eats away at my brain, and as much as I strongly appreciate the feedback I've been getting from my commenters and subscribers, I still feel the need to shake my channel up with a couple of other things here and there. Something's fun. It's no secret that a number of callouts I've been made pertain to people fed up with the whole nostalgia being exploited trend, and I've tried to offer some of my own perspectives when and where it can work, as well as frequently reinforcing that original stuff is out there, but it can only succeed if you viewers support it, which I myself go out of my way to do. But for a change, I decided I wanted to make talking about revamping nostalgia a fun topic once more. One that provides brain exercises and creativity and some interesting back and forth exchange between ideas. But for today, I won't be touching anything that regards remakes or reboots. Today, I'm talking about movies I have personal attachment towards that I feel have the potential to offer more, as in they have the potential to have their story continue with a sequel or spin-off series. Heads up, all of my options on this list are animated because that's my main passion, but feel free to let me know of any live-action films you can think of that lend themselves to a series as well. Now, full confession time, world-building series aren't necessarily my forte for a few reasons. For one, most TV I've watched throughout my youth, I wasn't able to tune in every day on their airings because of the busy schedule I had, so the chances that I would miss out on an episode or two that would include something integral to recur throughout the series was very likely, and very common. Yes, this does sadly include The Last Airbender. So unfortunately, I've lost touch with some of my favorite ones throughout high school and college years, and only recently got to reacquaint myself with them. As for movie legacies, or book legacies that get adapted for film, very few of those tend to really hold my attention and keep my interest, though I don't know exactly why. Basically, series that rely on a lot of continuity tend to lose me, and I'm typically better at keeping track of continuity within single, self-contained stories. Call it short-term memory if you must, but I'm just one of those people. But from what I do know and love about world building and expanding upon legacies, I have a few ideas in mind for some movies that I believe have a lot more to offer than a certain designated runtime could allow for, or ones that I feel have more story opportunities in them that never got a chance to see the light of day because of circumstances not playing in their favor. This was a list I conjured up on DeviantArt about a year ago, and most of these decisions I still stand by, so I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. My opinions for this list generally stem from the in a dream world this would happen scenario, where things have a more likely chance of happening than they would in the world that we live in, where trust in whoever was in charge of making them wouldn't be so much of an issue, and where a chance of something being as good as possible could easily happen. So without further ado, on to the list. Number 5, The Road to El Dorado. This one is a big entry on my list, and I'll explain why here. As you may or may not know, The Road to El Dorado was in part inspired by the Bing Crosby, Bob Hope Road to series from the early days of television, and was intended to have its own set of sequels and spin-offs before it bombed at the box office. Now that it's become a cult classic with thousands upon thousands of adoring fans who love quoting the lines from it, maybe it's time to give them the nod that they deserve. There are lots of different directions to take the characters after they were last seen riding off in the jungle by the end of the original. With the premise of exploring 16th century Americas, they could discover other civilizations that have been theorized over but were never confirmed to be real, or they could explore already existing locations like the Galapagos Islands, or even give some sort of fictional reason as to how those giant stone faces arrived on Easter Island. Of course, one reason that the film didn't fly at the time may have been due to certain scenes like... and the fact that the movie supposedly features a gay pairing, but given how recent shows have been bold enough to delve into topics about sexual orientation and preference, that could be something that this movie taps into. I mean, I've heard a lot of complaints against Chell and how she was basically put into the mix at the time as a means of deniability for Miguel and Tulio being a gay couple, but I do think it's quite possible that either of them could also be bi, as it's also a topic for discussion in our current media. In fact, a show like this could have real potential to talk about some more grown-up themes if a series like this were aimed at the audience who grew up with it. The original movie itself, after all, was intended to be more geared towards adults before it was cut back down to a PG rating. After all, given how Osmosis Jones and Curious George were two movies from the 2000s decades that got their own series despite being financial flops, maybe this one deserves it too. As for the look of how a Team El Dorado series would look depending on what sort of budget it could afford, if it would be too much to make each episode on par with the original movie, as I could easily imagine being the case, I could conceive of it having a style that is semi-reminiscent of the Tangled spin-off series. I don't think it would hurt the designs of the characters in the movie, and if anything, would allow them to get more exaggerative with the expressions and have some even snappier timing for humor. Of course, a big deciding factor regarding whether this series could work or not would depend on two people in particular, Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh. Seeing how it's generally agreed upon that their improv chemistry behind the microphone was one of the movie's biggest strengths, any attempt to do it without them would likely pale in comparison, if not fall flat on their face. And given that both of them are at pretty ripe ages right now in their lives, I think only if they would be up for doing it once more could it work. Rise of the Guardians was another DreamWorks property that could easily lend itself to its own series with its own multitude of character and world-building stories, similar to how Kung Fu Panda and How to Train Your Dragon got their own episodic series and holiday specials. Especially since it has a huge and devoted fan base that you frequently see at annual Comic-Cons. In fact, I'm surprised that it doesn't exist already, especially if Home was considered a disappointment, from what I've heard, and that still got a Netflix series, as did Turbo. Although, I guess if DreamWorks is more interested in giving a sequel to The Croods, which is coming up later this year, as well as giving that Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron spinoff thingy on Netflix its own movie that's set to release in theaters, well, Lord only knows what their priorities currently are. Number 4, Meet the Robinsons. Meet the Robinsons is one Disney movie that had its own direct-to-video sequel planned before the plug on that whole trend was pulled, and it's one of the few movies from Disney's main canon that I actually don't object to seeing a sequel to. While at first it might sound like it would disrupt the resolution of the first movie, I think that it could work. After all, before Wilbur left Lewis by the end of the first movie, he said, "If you keep screwing up, I'll just keep coming back in time to set things straight." And if doing that sounds like it would just get too repetitive for a series, or if it would create too many rifts in the fabric of time, you can make episodes about how each member of the Robinsons family came to be a part of the family. After all, Netflix's How to Train Your Dragon series does shift the attention from Hiccup and Toothless more to the off-screen characters. And while Disney's upcoming films for this year fortunately don't consist of any sequels, I can see how the more recent sequels they have been releasing, including the ones from Pixar, have a personal goal to try and rebrand the term Disney sequel as something that people won't regard with such disdain as they frequently did before. Which brings me up to number 3, Zootopia. After my sister and I saw the first Zootopia in theaters, she said it felt almost like a pilot to a TV series, and that I could easily conceive. Sure, there's been a lot of talk about how Zootopia has room for a potential sequel, although it may not have been confirmed, but I think some episodic storytelling could benefit it as well, since the movie has only offered glimpses of places like Tundra Town or the Rainforest District, because to get a good look of them would mean having to slow down the film's plot. So why not talk about them more in a series and what happens to all the other animals who occupy those areas? There is a ton of lore to be built upon, characters we'd be all too thrilled to see more of, and the maturity to discuss relevant issues that all of us could benefit from being aware of. After all, one of the best things to come out of The Lion King 2, yes, I still have my VHS copy of this, apart from having either better quality than most other direct-to-video affair, is that it provides a whole lot of lore to the franchise and lends itself to numerous fan art and fan fictions online. Of course, Zootopia seems to be doing pretty well for its own lore and fan fictions, even with only one entry thus far. I still think that a second movie would be a good opportunity for any Zootopia fanatic to get new material out of, even their own chance to have a hand in writing a script to be put on a big screen. Number 2, The Incredibles. Well, yes, it's true we did get The Incredibles 2 just a couple years ago, and it was largely well received, although I know that there are a few people who were disappointed by it. And while yes, a third movie is underway, from what a lot of people have asked to see, it might call for more than a film's running time to satisfy. This is, after all, why The Incredibles has its own lineup of comics. Like any classic superhero world building, The Incredibles could really benefit from some episodic world building that addresses most of the themes from the first one. Unlike the Marvel and DC universe, The Incredibles doesn't oversaturate the market, and it doesn't go through different incarnations literally every other year. Seeing how tackling serious subjects related to family and social political issues is one of the things that the movies are praised for, there would be plenty more for it to talk about by spreading the themes over a series, instead of trying to cram them all into a 90-minute or 2-hour runtime. And besides, not that every episode has to be commentary heavy, some of them could be simple fun while providing good character world building. Similar to Jack Attack. And if it can't be done easily with the computer animation that the movies have got, it could be done in a similar retro 2D art styles that we see at the end credits to both movies, and even a little bit into the second movie. Or even like the hand-drawn segments in Ratatouille and its spin-off, Your Friend the Rat. And yes, maybe even Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has a potential for a series too, but not without giving up a lot of amazing technicals of the animation to accommodate the budget. Although I'd be perfectly happy to be proven wrong if that was something Sony wanted to happen. And my number one choice, Fantasia. Yes, the only pre-2000 selection on this list. Now wait, you may be asking, how on earth can you make something as artsy as Fantasia into something like a TV show? Well, Walt Disney initially planned to do more films that continued the Fantasia tradition before it became the biggest flop of his early career. The audience for it reinvigorated in the 60s and grew from there, but when Disney attempted to do another film like it with Fantasia 2000, it failed at the box office. So maybe them doing individual segments, similar to how they did it with Lorenzo and the Little Match Girl, could suffice better, making them accessible to viewers on streaming services like Disney+, like some of their other test shorts have been getting really good reception on. I know I'm not the first one to suggest something like this to continue the Fantasia legacy, but I dare you to tell me it's not a good idea. And making them available on a streaming service where there are no commercial interruptions would be all better for it. Granted, it might not have the same feeling of a concert hall that a Fantasia movie might, but at least they could do shorts without needing to have a feature-length movie to place them in front of, like most Disney Pixar shorts previously do. Now that we've got Disney+, that is most likely where we'd find shorts that serve as passion projects and exercises for newcomers in the field. So maybe we'll get some more Fantasia-like shorts in the future? Who knows? Only time will tell. So those are my selections of movies that I would think could lend themselves very easily to a series, and those are my selections of movies that I love that I think could lend themselves very easily to a series. Like I said, if you have any more suggestions, feel free to let me know. If you have any more input about my ideas, I look forward to hearing most from you. Feel free to like my video, comment, and subscribe to me, and I'll see you all very soon.